Hi, my name is Michelle Nicolo Prentice, and welcome to Mama's Lullaby Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to my kitchen. These are my friends, Amy Grant and BJ Jennings. He's my adopted son, and he's going to help us have a conversation today about motherhood and grandparenthood and lullabies and all that good stuff.
Well, Mom, thanks for letting me hang out with you, and a pleasure to meet you officially. Yes, absolutely. And so I'm honored to be at this table with these amazing women. And so I want to make sure if you're a first-time visitor to this kitchen, that you know what we do here. So we do two things. One, we always celebrate the journey of motherhood. And so whatever your journey is, however it's looked or unfolded, we want you to know that your journey matters, and we celebrate you and what you do for your family and really for yourself in the world. And second thing we do is we want to give a place where you, the mother, gets to be mothered. So for the next 20, 30 minutes-ish, these two lovely ladies also get to serve as like a mother to you for a bit, right? Put their arm around you and let you know that you've got somebody who cares about you and get to be nurtured. So all of the responsibility that you have to care for the people in your life, put that down for a second and come hang out with us. And so I have the privilege of interviewing these fine folks and talking about what we're doing here, which is about us launching a collection of lullabies for you and a beautiful song they wrote together called Looking at You. But before I do that, I'll let you introduce the guest to your right, and then we can jump into the conversation.
Okay. Well, as you know, this is Amy Grant. She's just an amazing songwriter as well as an incredible artist and singer. And when this project came to me, I would get sort of names of people to call, like by God, I believe. And when her name came up, I thought, is this really God talking to me, or am I just like making this stuff up? But I had met Amy because she did a benefit for a mutual friend of ours who had been paralyzed by a terrible accident. And she was so incredibly gracious. And she helped me through that time. I don't know if you remember this, but we were trying to raise like $100,000 in like 3 months for this family. And you called me up over the weekend and you said, I've done so many of these. You said, how are the ticket sales going? And I said, not very good. It was on Tuesday and this was like Friday, and we had sold maybe 127 of 1,000. And I said, not very good. And you said, why don't you just ask for a love offering? And just people will give more. And I'm like, okay. But in this whole time, I just had this faith that God was going to pull it through. I didn't know how, because I couldn't see a way that we were going to fill that room. Anyway, that day came. And when we walked out on stage, that place was full. Do you remember that at the factory? So that was my introduction to Amy, just so calm in the midst of my crazy storm. And so when I got her name to write with, I thought she's not going to probably write the song with me, but I'm going to ask. And when I texted her the first time, I didn't hear back from you. And I thought, okay, she's not interested. It's fine. I don't want to bug her. I want to be very respectful. And then I'm walking and I hear, text Amy again, and this time be specific about what you want. And so I was like, oh man, she's going to think I'm a stalker. She's going to rue the day she gave me her number. And so I texted you, and then like 10 minutes later you said, I'm driving, call me. And we talked about this idea of writing lullabies for moms specifically, music that would soothe, calm, and make them feel more relaxed, not so much for the babies.
Right.
And you said, I love that idea because I would have really enjoyed having something like that. So that's how we got together. And you said, I go, well, great. And you said, just call me anytime. And the next week you had available. So, I mean, your schedule is crazy and I can't even, that's why I know it's a God thing, right? Because how did I get in with you that next week?
Yeah. And I want to comment on whatever language you use to say it, whether you put it in faith words, but as women, as mothers, that gut instinct, when something hits you in the gut, it's so important to act on that.
Yeah. Oh, boy, is it.
And I have 4 daughters, and one's my I do daughter. But to me, just encouraging them, follow your gut, because that is, that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
And I think the divine speaks to us in our gut.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And nobody else can tell you what your gut is saying.
No.
And that's important when you are taking care of yourself. It's important when you're taking care of another human being. So
yeah. And it's scary sometimes. because I found that it was like, I wasn't sure. I'm like, is that really, you're questioning the message because you get you get your head in the way.
Yep.
And then you're like, but I just trusted it. In this whole process, I've just been trusting it. So yeah. And it was awesome. And we wrote, like, it took us, I think, 6 months to finish this song. You said to me, first thing you said, you go, first of all, I'm not a fast writer.
I'm not.
So don't expect a song today. But we got pretty far. I think we got most everything except the bridge. That was what took us another 6 months to get. But it's a pretty fabulous song. And there's a great story behind it. So I'm going to talk about that.
Yeah, that's delightful. Well, how about that? That's perfect. Let's jump right into that song called Looking at You and tell us more about the story behind the song.
Okay. I'll just go the basic. I had wanted to write a song about, so now she has a brand new grandbaby, days old.
That's right.
And when I said to her, we judge ourselves so harshly as women. We judge ourselves for what we look like. We judge ourselves for our bodies. We judge ourselves for what kind of a job we're doing, whatever. And I said, when you have a newborn baby or an infant, they look at you. If we could see ourselves through their eyes, we could have the worst hair, no makeup, puffy eyes, whatever. And those babies look at us like we are the most beautiful thing in the world. They love us unconditionally. And I said, we could learn to look at ourselves through their eyes. And that's kind of what it started out. And then you told me this beautiful story about your mom. Would you mind?
Right, sure. So we wrote this in 2018, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, when my mother had passed away in 2012, and when she did, a friend of mine, his name is Scott Tolley, he lives in Florida. It's a beautiful family, but he's great with words. And he wrote me a note and he said, before we had mirrors, our first impression of ourselves was looking in our mother's faces. And everything that reflected back to us helped us understand who we are. And so when you said, look how a baby looks at us. And I have spent the last 4 days having the midnight shift with my grandson, who's just a week old today. And I don't know if he can focus yet, but I mean, there's nothing like just that, the coo in your voice and the back and forth and a little bit of a smile. And I'm sure it's gas on his part.
Maybe.
Even so, but to say that what we see in each other has so little to do with the details of what we can see. It has to do with what you feel from somebody. That's right. And so instead of, and so we took Scott Tolley's line and morphed it. Who needs mirrors when I can see the way you look at me?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought that was so beautiful. I mean, and plus, Amy's such a gifted storyteller. And that is, as me being a novelist, I had never really written before. And I was telling them earlier in another podcast that trusting that voice inside, if it would have been my idea, like, I want to write lullabies for moms and I'm going to call these Grammy Award winning songwriters, I know them, I've worked with them, whatever, it's fine as a singer.
Right.
But not as a writer because I didn't write before. I would have been very intimidated, but I wasn't. I didn't feel intimidated in the slightest. I felt so excited. And because I'm like, these people, this is their craft, this is what they do, and I'm going to tell them what I want to write about, and they're going to help me craft this. And that's exactly what happened. And it was so easy, and each session was so easy with each of these writers, and it was magical. So I know it's a divine thing, and I'm excited to put it out in the world.
Yeah. Well, let me ask both of you a follow-up question. You kind of talked about how the initial inspiration was you just being so aware of how critical a mom is of herself. Out of curiosity, knowing what you both know now as mothers and grandmothers, why is that? Like, what is it that instinctive? I mean, obviously, I have two small children, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and my wife. I've heard her vocalize some of her criticism of herself. What is it about motherhood that sometimes instinctively kind of raises the volume of that inner critic?
You want to go first?
Well, I think we live in a culture of a lot of comparison. And whether we're looking for it or not, just examples of this is how it could be, this is how it should be. And I think we're not encouraged to speak kindly to ourselves, even though life is better if you speak gently to yourself. We were hosting something, I have a big family, and I was feeling a little bit like, just a little tense. And like with just my 3 sisters and me and our families, it's almost 70 people. So if anybody brings anybody, so like,
wow.
And I was feeling, our house was a gathering house, and I could feel my heart racing. And I just scribbled down on a piece of paper, keep it simple. Take each moment as it comes. Be gentle on yourself and others. It was scribbled, and I just stuck that on the refrigerator. Keep it simple. Take each moment as it comes. Be gentle on yourself and others. I was helping a friend of mine, Cece Winans, do a cooking show, which she said, can we come do this in your kitchen? And she saw this scribbled note on the refrigerator. I said, oh, that's been there for years. It's just my motto to be gentle and all that. Anyway, a week later, she had that printed and beautifully framed. And she said, I've never seen this before. And I thought, well, what inner monologue are we exercising? Because I want something that I can just say over and over to myself. Keep it simple. Take each moment as it comes. Be gentle on yourself and others. And who knows why we don't do that, but we can make a change.
Right.
We can start this minute. We get to choose the words we say to ourselves.
Yeah.
And just choose something different.
Well, and our children are watching us too. And that's the other thing. Like, we're training our children to do the same thing. They watch us, they see us, they hear us.
Yes.
I think when I was young and I had Gabby, who I was 18 when I had her, it almost felt like in my mind, probably because I was young and just unaware, but it was like she was just a part of my appendage, like an appendage of mine. I would talk on the phone in front of her about things I probably shouldn't have talked about in front of her. But you're just so used to having them there, you don't really think about what's the impact from their viewpoint, from their perspective, right? They don't have the ability to discern, right? What they don't want, what they do want, which is how we end up turning into our mothers sometimes, because we get the programming just in there. And sometimes that's a good thing. And sometimes the things about how we were raised, we don't want to necessarily perpetuate certain things. So, and same for my kids. But I think that is, we aren't taught in our culture to speak kindly. It's like, oh, you're full of yourself. That's not, everyone's so afraid to love themselves. It's like, well, if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else really well.
Yeah. My daughter that just had a baby a week ago also has a 2-year-old. And when she was describing couples, she said, most couples, like one person in the couple is kind of like the golden retriever, lick, 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 friendly, and others sort of a cat, more circumspect.
Right.
You can't demand love from me, whatever. And she said, do you find like most couples have kind of a combination? And I said, I'd never really thought about it. And she said, my husband and I are clearly 2 cats, and we have birthed a golden retriever, a 2-year-old. And anyway, and it was so funny because she was, a little bit of a distant teenager, all that kind of stuff. And I was asking her one time, what did you do with Penelope, because her 2-year-old, because it's different than the way that you personally are wired. And I thought this was a great piece of advice. And she said, I truly had no idea how I was going to bond with this child. I wasn't just like, always wanted to be a mom. She said, I wanted a family, but all of the touchy-feely stuff was not in my wheelhouse.
Okay.
Somewhere she had read, for the first 3 years of their life, greet your child every time you walk into the room with them. every time you see them with the same affection that you naturally express toward your favorite pet. And we don't even think about it. Like babies don't come with an instruction.
No, they do not.
And so something that's familiar like that.
Yeah, that's
and she
so
said,
brilliant, actually.
Yeah. And also then you get a natural rapport. Hey, baby girl, hi.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, we all lean toward things that are encouraging and positive.
That's right.
We lean into the smile. And sometimes it's hard to have a smile when you're exhausted with a baby.
That is so true. But also just that some people are naturally like that. They're naturally nurturing. They're naturally loving and affectionate. And not everybody is. And sometimes I think we can shame people for not having that natural ability or that natural urge. As I've gotten older and I've watched people.
Not everybody does.
Not everybody does. And it doesn't make them an unloving person. It makes them they're just different. They see things differently. But everyone with an animal that loves animals, that's such a great analogy. That's very smart, actually.
That's right. I mean, I'm feeling convicted from that. I'm like, I wish I had that advice. I wish I just had that advice just a few years ago. And maybe it's because I think when I think about even, you always assume your pet has zero negative intentions, right? Like
That's
they're
true.
just here to be loved on and loved back, and that's it. I'm assuming my pet has no motives, right? Right?
Well, a dog has no motives.
That's
But
fair.
a cat might
That's
have
fair.
motives.
But with kids, I mean, over time, because if you're in a season that, let's say, even at 2-3 range, we're like, no, everything's no. You're like, I'm so tired of a person fighting me trying to keep them alive.
Right.
And you show up and you already have your own defenses up against what might feel like your child being in a defiant stage. So that's really, I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go do that when I go home. And the podcast is not for me, but it's now for me. I do want to ask you both. You talked about just making a change. Like you can just start talking gentler to yourself. And one thing I have observed in public discourse amongst mothers, I am not a mother, I know nothing. We know that. Is sometimes I think the sage elders and mothers who come for the next generation, like, you don't know my pain. You don't know what I'm going through, because there's a generational disconnect, right? Because I'm in the white hot fire of sleep deprivation or toddler tantrums, and you've already kind of risen above it with your sage advice. Out of curiosity, for each of you individually, when did that light bulb flip for you personally? We're like, I'm going to stop being critical of myself. I'm going to be nicer to myself. Like, was there a moment in time you remember where the light bulb flipped for you personally in your motherhood journey, where you said, I'm going to start being gentler with myself?
Well, I think that choice of how we talk to ourselves is a new choice every day. I think it's a new choice, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Goodness gracious.
And so, so it's always.
Have you always felt that way? Is it something you just innately knew, or is that did somebody inspire you, or?
I think as I've gotten older, I realized the power of our choice. And that's really what it comes down to. There's so many things that we cannot control about life. You cannot control anybody else, but you can put your hands on your own steering wheel.
Right.
And if something feels good, you can steer yourself toward that.
Right.
And if something feels bad, you can steer away from that. And, but really hands on your own wheel and how you choose to respond. There was it Viktor Frankl?
Yes, Man's Search for Meaning.
Or was it Elie Wiesel? I'm not sure. It was somebody who went through all the horrors of the concentration camp. And they said, true liberation is that moment and space that we have between what's coming at us, that space, and how we respond.
Yep.
That's liberty.
Yep.
And so, and understanding the power of that choice. And I, so that I think that's a life journey. And it can be, but just how we respond to ourselves, how we respond to, okay, now where? And But all of those things, when you kind of collect yourself and say, all I really can do is put my hands on my own wheel. I'm going to trust my gut. If you're a person of faith or not, you go, nobody has got the script that I've got to live from. I'm going to trust big love to speak to me through my gut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really think, I remember telling a young woman that I know who has made it very clear to me she doesn't want to hear anything about faith. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I said, hey, like the two easiest prayers are thank you and help. And if that's all you ever prayed, that's okay.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm not praying. And I said, okay, just feel free though. Like you don't, that can be like the first prayer you ever pray is like help. And she called me, this was years ago, and she called and said, okay, I did it. And I said, what? And she said, I was supposed to be somewhere. My toddler, I guess, had taken my car keys.
Wow.
And I didn't know where they were. And I mean, I had looked. And I said, what'd you do? She said, finally I stood in the middle of the room and I just shouted, help.
Oh, wow.
And I said, how long did it take? And she said, within a minute. And I said, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But when you open your eyes to the world around you, there's so much beauty and so much order.
Yeah.
And you're not on this journey alone.
Yeah.
And help, that is a prayable prayer, even if you've never bowed your head.
And I think that's where the majority of anxiety comes from, is we forget.
We
We're
feel
not
alone.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
That leads me to
Great,
one of the lines here where it says, lessons in life, lessons in love, learning to try and fly and fall and get back up. And when you doubt, as all believers do, you'll find some faith when you look at me looking at you, whether that's your mother, your spouse, your children, or your spiritual guide, whatever you believe,
Yes.
I love that. I love that line so much. It's so beautiful.
That is beautiful. Well, first of all, this is awesome. And so I do want to give you both a chance. For someone who, let's say, is navigating kind of the season you're describing in the song, right? It's okay. Maybe this individual is struggling to be gentle with themselves, or maybe it's a new thing to be consciously gentle with themselves. What's something you would like them to hear from you in this moment?
There is a freedom in learning to speak the truth. And whether it's good, this feels so amazing, whether it's bad, I don't want to be here right now, but to learn to speak the truth, your experiential truth. And then when you speak the truth, rather than whatever, role playing or I ought to be feeling this,
Right.
but when we give ourselves freedom to speak the truth, I'm exhausted, then that our reality, which is the truth that we speak, that reality, when we speak it, it suddenly enters the community of life. And there is a greater truth that you're loved. There's a greater truth that all will be well. But until you speak your truth in the moment, you just are kind of isolated from yourself, from the experience. It keeps you from being present to your own life.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I would just speak the truth and realize that your truth is part of a much bigger context of truth that is good and loving. And each one of us is finding our way one day at a time.
That's very true. My friend Annie Sims said this to me years ago. She said, speak your truth as soon as you know it. And that's, it's scary to speak your truth sometimes because you might have a reaction from somebody else. And, Mark and I have had this conversation many times, and you've been married a long time. So, you're married, it's like, sometimes we don't say things because we don't want a reaction. But the truth is, if you allow the reaction to be their reaction and let them have their reaction, it doesn't have to really have anything to do with you. They have a right to feel and do whatever they do, how they feel about it. But you also have a right to say how you feel, and then allowing that person to be personally responsible for their emotions and their feelings. You be personally responsible for your emotions and your feelings. Then we can have these difficult conversations sometimes with people. Because I used to feel very responsible for somebody else's feelings.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps us from telling the truth all the time. Even with my kids, like my kids now, the older kids, they're very brutally honest with me a lot of the time. And it is painful sometimes.
Yeah.
But those of you that have little ones, there comes a point when they become adults and they start kind of looking at their own lives and looking at their own issues. And then sometimes they point their finger at you and say, you did this to me and it's your fault and you're blah, blah, blah. But that's just part of life. That's part of growing up. And then you understand, hey, if I'm feeling it, it's in me. And my mom did the best she could with what she knew and where she was. But it's a humbling thing. It was for me, to have to look at my part in certain things, but also understand that, like, I really did do the best I could. And I wasn't perfect, because you're not going to be perfect. You can't be perfect. And I'm still learning and growing, but it's really nice for my kids to be able to say, hey, Mom, that's not helpful. And I don't take it personally anymore. Before I'd be like, they don't love me. They don't like me. They think I'm a terrible mom. And I did all this for that, And I actually remember sitting at this kitchen table. There's a lot of tears at this kitchen table. My kids telling me the truth about their experience. And I wanted to explain what was going on in that time of my life so they could understand why I had to do. But they didn't need, what they needed was for me just to hear them and say, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And that was humbling and hard for me because I didn't get to explain my part. But what I really wanted in the big picture was to have a very close relationship with them. And I wanted to give them what they needed. So motherhood is also very humbling if you really want to tell the truth and have the truth told to you. But it also then opens up this whole other level of deepness with the relationship when you can be honest with each other.
Yeah.
So
big adventure. It's a big adventure.
Indeed.
Well, first of all, thank you both for that. This is the kind of thing I wish I would have my iPad take my own notes. Luckily, I could listen back like everybody else. Yeah. Well, first of all, this song is beautiful. And when you hear Looking at You, you will be blown away. So what you need to do right now, as soon as this is over, go to Spotify, go to Apple Music, and look up Mama's Lullaby and listen to Looking at You. Okay? So that's the first thing you need to do. Second, you can actually, once you fall in love with this song, you're going to fall in love with the rest of the album as well. So I want you to go to Mama's Lullaby and actually purchase this album so you can actually enjoy it everywhere you are. We hope that it creates moments for you to feel at peace and gives you spaces to explore the emotions that come with your journey in a hopefully a very beautiful way. And so with that being said, we want to thank you for watching and listening to this podcast. I want to thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yes. And Mom, I think your voice on this song is just
beautiful.
I mean, I was literally about to text you or listening in here. It was like, you are such a badass singer. Like, it just, and so I want to thank you for being here, and hope you join us next time on the next episode of Mama's Lullaby.
And be kind to yourself. Bye.
Bye.
When I hold you, I look into the windows of your soul, knowing there's so much that I don't know, and it's beautiful like an open road. We'll take our time learning as we go. Lessons in life, lessons in love, learning to try and fly and fall and get back up. And when you die, believers do. You'll find some faith when you look at me, looking at you.